Hey, quick question. When you're looking at a piece of land, what's the first thing you think about? Probably the acreage, right? Maybe the price, the location, how far it is from town. But I'd bet drainage isn't even on your radar. And that's exactly what we're talking about today. Welcome back to the Land Buyer's Guide. I'm Scott Thomas, owner of landparker.com, where we sell discounted rural vacant land with affordable owner financing, sometimes as low as $100 down and $100 a month. And today we're getting into something that doesn't get nearly enough attention in the land buying world. Drainage. I know. Not the sexiest topic. But stick with me here because this stuff genuinely matters. So let's start with what drainage even means when we're talking about rural land. It's basically how water moves across your property and through it. That includes rainwater and snowmelt, running across the surface, moisture, moving through different layers of soil underneath, the water table down below, and even runoff coming off neighboring land or roads. Rural parcels are bigger, the terrain varies a lot, and there usually aren't engineered systems in place like you'd find in a suburb. So water has more room to move, and more room to cause headaches if things aren't set up right. Now here's what a lot of people don't realize. Poor drainage doesn't just mean a muddy yard, it can quietly affect almost every part of how you use that land. Think about it. If you want to build something, a cabin, a shop, a home, you need stable, dry ground. Wet, saturated soil makes foundations expensive and difficult. Concrete doesn't pour well into waterlogged earth. That's a real problem. And if you're planning on putting in a septic system, drainage becomes even more critical. Septic systems depend on the soil absorbing and filtering wastewater. If the soil's already saturated, it can't do that. The system fails. That's not just expensive, it's a health issue. Same thing goes for gardening or farming. Most vegetables, fruit trees, pasture grasses, they don't like wet feet. Waterlogged roots rot, nutrients wash out. You end up with a lot of work for very little yield. And then there's erosion. Water moving too fast across bare or sloped land strips away your topsoil. Topsoil is incredibly valuable on rural land. Losing it is a slow motion loss that's hard to undo. Oh, and driveways. Unpaved rural driveways and access roads are super vulnerable to washouts. Water gets under them, moves through, and you end up with ruts and washed out sections that make it hard to get in and out after a good rain. So yeah, drainage matters a lot. The good news is most issues are manageable if you catch them early or plan for them up front. So how do you evaluate drainage before you buy? One of the best things you can honestly do is visit a property after it's rained significantly. You get a real picture of how the land handles water. Where does it pool? Where does it drain away quickly? That tells you a ton. But even on a dry day, there are things to look for. Patches of really lush, green grass and flat areas can actually be a sign of consistent moisture underneath. Hydric soils, those dark, mucky, sometimes blue-gray soils, are a sign the ground has been saturated for long periods. Water-loving plants like cattails or willows clustering in spots that aren't near a stream or pond, that's a clue too. Deep ruts in field roads, erosion gullies on slopes, staining on existing foundation walls. All worth noting. It's also worth pulling up a topographic map of the parcel. Just understanding the natural slope and the low points tells you a lot about where water wants to flow. A lot of county GIS websites offer free topo and soil data. It takes maybe 20 minutes to look through and it can save you a lot of surprises. If you're buying through a seller or working with an agent, a few targeted questions go a long way. Has any part of the property held water seasonally or flooded? Are there existing drainage ditches, culverts, or tile systems on the land? Has a perk test been done if you're thinking about septic? Are there any agreements with neighboring landowners about water flow? Those are the kinds of questions that get you real, useful answers. Now let's say you already own land with some drainage challenges, or you're buying a place where you know there are some issues. There are solid, proven ways to handle it, and some of them are pretty accessible even for someone who isn't a contractor. Grading is one of the most effective long-term fixes. You're basically shaping the land to direct water away from buildings and toward natural outlets. Even a gentle slope away from your building site can prevent pooling. You don't always need a huge project. Sometimes it's pretty modest adjustments. French drains are another option. They're trenches filled with gravel and a perforated pipe that intercept and redirect groundwater. Really useful when subsurface water is the main issue. And if you're buying land with some agricultural history, it's worth looking into whether there's already drainage tile buried in the fields. Older farms sometimes have clay tile systems that have been there for decades. Swales and berms are popular in permaculture and homestead design. A swale is basically a shallow channel dug along the contour of a slope. It slows water down and spreads it across the land so it can soak in rather than run off. Pair that with a berm, a raised mound of soil, and you've got a system that both manages wet spots and helps drier upland areas hold moisture. It's low-tech and really effective. For driveways and field roads, culverts and roadside ditches are kind of essential. The key thing with culverts is sizing. One that's too small will back up water and erode the road. Getting local input on this is genuinely helpful because somebody who knows your area's rainfall patterns is going to give you better guidance than a generic recommendation. And don't underestimate plants. Strategic planting, deep-rooted cover crops, riparian buffers along waterways actually improves how soil handles moisture over time. It also reduces erosion and builds long-term soil health. It's a slower fix, but it compounds in a really good way. Now, most drainage improvements are honestly DIY friendly, especially if you've got access to a tractor or a skid steer. But there are situations where you really want professional input. Large-scale, earth-moving projects, properties near wetlands where regulations can come into play, failing septic systems, drainage issues that affect neighboring land or shared water flow. In those cases, a local land surveyor, civil engineer, or county extension office can point you in the right direction and help you avoid costly mistakes. One resource a lot of rural landowners don't know about: the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service, or NRCS. They have offices in a lot of rural counties, and they offer free technical assistance for landowners dealing with drainage and erosion issues. Worth a call if you've got a more complicated situation. So here's the takeaway from all of this. Drainage planning isn't glamorous. It's not the fun part of buying land, but it's foundational. How your land handles water affects everything else. Your ability to build, to grow food, to maintain roads, to have a working septic system. A property that manages water well is genuinely easier to work with and more valuable over time. The approach that serves most people well is pretty simple. Start by observing. Visit the property, look for the signs we talked about, pull up a topo map, ask good questions before you close, and if you buy land with some drainage quirks, take things one step at a time. You don't have to fix everything at once. All right, that's going to wrap it up for today's episode. If you're in the market for rural land and want to explore affordable options with easy owner financing, head over to landparker.com. We've got discounted rural properties across the country, and we make it easy to get started, sometimes as low as $100 down. Take a look at what's available, do some exploring, and if you've got questions, we're always happy to help. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.